When my father Kevin G. Webb got married in 1958 at age 27, people started pretending he got married solely to attempt to desperately have a legitimate eligible new Habsburg royal child before his grandfather Prince Sebastian Habsburg died, who was in palliative care in Europe at the time. Blatant liar rubbish. Then they replaced his wife, my mother, with an identical lookalike pregnant with the granddaughter of a neo-Nazi who tortured Prince Sebastian Habsburg during the end of World War II. So, when the child was born, it would not be my father Kevin's child, and would not be eligible to be a Habsburg royal. It would be the grandchild of a maximum security prison escapee 1943 who tortured Prince Sebastian Habsburg until the end of World War II instead. As if it was the ultimate torture tease of Prince Sebastian and my Habsburg royal family whilst he was on his deathbed. As a follow-up to him being illegally detained in Dachau prison by the neo-Nazis between early 1944 and the end of World War II in Germany in mid-1945. With plans to interfere to stop my father Kevin ever having an eligible Habsburg royal child registered to him at birth and at home in his custody, regardless of how many children he conceived in his real life. Via what turned out to be once or twice a year sex. I am, though, and was born to him and his wife registered at birth the 18th of January, 1972. So, when my father Duke and Lord Kevin Webb the Habsburg was diagnosed seriously ill in the 90s, which caused him to be put in palliative care in the early 2000s, they pretended I should have suddenly gotten married to a female, any female, and desperately tried to have a legitimate eligible new Habsburg royal child before he died, because that is what they pretended he did, so I should appear to do it as well. My father Kevin did not react or cope well after I was assaulted in hospital in October 1996. He was borderline berserk for a long time period afterwards, but managed to control himself really well. I was only supposed to be in hospital a maximum of 6 hours. I was in hospital for over 27 hours instead. When I managed to get up and got home okay, they talked as if one day was missing from my memory calendar constantly, and it was hilarious and I hadn't noticed, 4 months. Some of them had visited me whilst I was in a coma in the operating theatre, as if I wouldn't be aware of it anyway if I survived afterwards, but would probably die. That psychological fault of assuming consequence-free heinous crime time was upon them, the lunatics, jackpot. When my father Duke and Lord Kevin was diagnosed as seriously ill, they tried to make me do what they pretended he did when he got married in 1958, when his grandfather Prince Sebastian was terminally ill in palliative care. If anyone who reads this doesn't find the concepts distressing, they have something wrong with them. When I went into hospital in 1996, the females swapping places pretending to be my mother were dating 2 men pretending to be the same person. Twins. They had been since the early 1980s. They were both unstable types, but one in particular would get very tired, sit down in a chair, and sleep doze regularly. He would semi-wake up and start moving his head from side to side like trying to ring it as if it was a bell, and start making strange squeaking screeching noises, mentioning a deceased person from his past who he said was his sister when he was a child. When he was mostly asleep, it would start with him mumbling she said come on his name, let's go to the, and then his head would start going side to side and it would become difficult to understand. I had no doubt personally that it was caused by him having something to do with her death. After they started dating the women pretending to be my mother, swapping places pretending to be the same couple, they started breeding children with both men's sperm. When I went into hospital in 1996 and my semen was stolen for the second time when I was unconscious, they had already picked out 7 females bred with their sperm. They looked almost identical. When I went into hospital, the 7 females, all children of the 2 men claiming to be dating my fake mothers, were staying in a motel in the local area. I think it was in my old hometown of Yarragon. The motel there has the house Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern died in on the 20th of April, 1982 in the background countryside. They immediately took some of my stolen sperm to the motel when I was still unconscious on the operating table. A Scandinavian man then got all 7 pregnant with it whilst I was still in a too much anesthetic coma. They filmed it and made a little highlights movie of it. All 7 females had been on fertility drugs for quite a while beforehand, waiting for me to go into hospital. I had been booked in for the operation and excruciatingly long over 12 months beforehand, but had to wait. They kept taking fertility drugs after they were gotten pregnant. It may have been followed like some strange, organized crime TV documentary. That sort of thing actually happens constantly. They behave like it is live TV drama for a reason. They film it and broadcast it illegally on pirate networks, particularly organized crime satellite TV. They think the real legal stuff is the sideshow, including the sport. At just under 5 months into the pregnancy during 1997, they all went into section surgery to remove the gestating babies. They ripped them all out, an average of over 5 per female, then dumped them all in humidity cribs to see which one survived. Threw away any that didn't, apparently. They stitched them all back up and told them to keep taking the fertility drugs. When they started ovulating again, they got them pregnant with my stolen sperm again. 5 months later, they did the same thing. They kept the babies that survived and threw away the ones that didn't. Stitched them all up, told them they could stop taking the fertility drugs, and sent them on a holiday. They ended up with just over 70 babies bred with my stolen sperm from the 7 lookalike females. All 7 of them daughters of the 2 men pretending to be the same man, who were making like they were partnered to the women pretending to be my mother. The 70 that survived, anyway. They decided to combine their 2 crime theories. After I left hospital, they always stated to people who asked about me that I just didn't seem the same afterwards. I was different to talk to, pantomiming around each other as if practicing for onlookers or targets. After they started trying to discuss it with me and got no response, they disappeared on a holiday. They ended up stopping in northeastern Victoria in an indigenous Yorta Yorta community area near the Murray River. My great-grandmother Deborah was Yorta Yorta, wife of my grandfather Vincente Linghiari, born Vincente Mussolini. They contacted me during 1997 and said if I wanted, I could travel there and live with them and they could get me a horticultural job at a huge almond farm. I mulled it over and decided to take them up on it. I knew they had ulterior motives, but didn't mind the idea of taking a break from Gippsland and living there for a while. They always had ulterior motives after all. This was whilst the two men's 7 lookalike daughters were gestating the over 70 babies born in 1997 to my stolen sperm in 2 pregnancies each in less than 1 year. When I got there, they were nervous and there was no job. It was weeks before they told me I could do some casual nursery work. It seemed like they got a lucky break with the work. They talked to me as if a job was waiting when I got there. There wasn't really any watchable television or mobile phone coverage. I didn't mind, though. I hadn't spent much time around friends out and about since my very early 20s for health reasons. I didn't have a mobile phone at the time. They decided they may as well go for complete broke with the pantomime torture stuff. They decided they were going to try to force me, a homosexual, to lose my virginity with one of the 7 female daughters of the 2 men swapping places claiming to be dating my mother. They would get to laugh about it for life in their own opinion if I lost my virginity with a female that had already had 14 children in 2 pregnancies with my stolen sperm in less than a year in 1997. If it happened, they would have her gradually swap places with the other 6 and try to fool me into having sex with all 7 as if they were all the one female. All the while thinking that if I did have sex with one and date it, they might make me get engaged to it, even marry it. If I did, they could claim I was desperately trying to have an eligible Habsburg child before my father Duke and Lord Kevin died. Like they pretended my dad was trying to when he got married in 1958, before his grandfather Prince Sebastian Habsburg died, 1960. If I did, they were intending to pretend she, the 7 of them pretending to be the same female, would steal everything off me, from all inheritances, very quickly. They thought the whole plan was total genius. I'd look like I was doing what they pretended my dad did and be forced to lose my virginity with a woman who already had children using my stolen sperm to boot. It would be in an isolated area without mobile phone coverage and 1 channel of TV. They bet on the idea I would be engaged within 3 months of being introduced to the first one. As if I had no idea about the 2 men and the fake mothers swapping places pretending to be the same couple at all. Okay, so the females were probably related to, or descended from, like, a neo-Nazi from World War II or something, then. I was a mess. And I mean a total mess. I learned to work those angles tactically very quickly beyond what I already knew in the next 2 years. It also just happened to be during the build-up to a referendum on whether to retain me as the constitutional monarchy of Germany for another 100 years, too. It was eventually held in January 2000. I won. In 1998 they introduced me to the first one. The 14 children with my stolen sperm in less than a year record holder. It was hate at first sight and they were wide-eyed, thinking I'd be engaged within 3 months, no worries. She introduced herself with a joke. Why don't cannibals eat clowns? Because they taste funny. Probably a reference to psycho serial pervert John Wayne Gacy, who was bred with Albert Einstein's sperm. Gacy used to make himself over to look like Kaiser Adolf in prisoner of war jail, but a clown dressed like the flag of Yugoslavia when hired to entertain children. Then make himself over to look like all my other predecessors, but an evil clown version when committing his heinous crimes. When I was introduced to her, some procedure for work was being casually explained, and a request for an estimation of how long does it have to be was replied with something like 10 to 12 inches. In a miserable bored-tired reflex-type action, I looked at the person introducing me to her, reached for the top of my zip on my pants, and pretended I might just flop it out for her there and then to introduce myself, you know. Very casually. And did an impersonation of a photo of Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern, taken after his coronation in January 1940. He was dating a homosexual Jewish rabbi at the time, who was his official date on the guest list for the ceremony at my property Wewelsburg Castle on the 18th of January, 1940. He had been dressed similar to photographs of his uncle Kaiser Friedrich Hohenzollern IV and his cousin and predecessor Wilhelm II for the coronation. One of those uniforms with the fold-over flap at the front, across the belly and chest, fastened with a row of buttons. Sometime afterwards he had gone out dressed in the same uniform with his Jewish rabbi date for the coronation. They were both drunk. The rabbi had jokingly dared him to flop his penis out for the camera in the courtyard entranceway to Wewelsburg Castle and took a picture of a very drunk Adolf pretending he was about to unzip his fly for it, dressed up to look like his uncle Friedrich IV. Guess the humor of it was lost on them, me pretending I was about to flop it out like an introduction before engagement or something, and all. They still pretend I was bragging about the size of my penis to her. They gradually started trying to introduce the other 6 to me very gently, in short, controlled bursts. If I didn't show any interest initiating time with one of them, I showed no interest, but was polite, then I got poisoned and harassment, and things like that. That is where that annoying thing people do about a male royal being such a gentleman thing comes from. Realistically I should have defended myself with voice and open loud refrain disgust at what they were claiming they were trying to do, maybe even beat one up if I didn't run a sharp thing through them or something. When they carry on that way and the angry violent self-defense yelling response doesn't happen, they say the royal involved is such a gentleman for not headbutting them unconscious or at least slapping them. And if that is a gay man, they claim it makes him even more attractive to females. They went ahead with their plan. I went to lunch in a little caravan, the people swapping places pretending to be my mother and her partner lived in part-time, just the two pretending to be them at any one time. And one fake mommy was there. The little slit window above the kitchen area was open and I was eating homemade bread. A supervisor pulled up in a utility and parked outside the window, across the gravel road. I could see the car when it stopped through the mesh on the little window. One of the 7 females got out of the car and they started giggling and flirting with each other, chasing each other around the car. Then she said, bizarrely loudly, and after I get engaged and married to him and is dead and we have stolen everything off him, we'll run away together. And they hugged each other. It was loudly, clearly audible through the window. My eyes went from them through the window to the fake mommy looking at me eating lunch. The look on her face. A one-off facial expression I'd probably never see again in my life. She semi-bravely pseudo-soldiered on as if I didn't hear a thing. Germans would laugh heartily at that. That is their weakness, right there. Things got hideously difficult. I tried to go out, ended up a gambling machine slot jockey for a while. Spending almost everything I earned in a club across the border in New South Wales. Casual sexual interest in me from homosexual men got an "I'm too messed up right now" response initially. I even went out with one of the females in attendance. I ended up going to see the film The Matrix with one of the 7, just a casual nearly acquaintances night. I just wanted to see the movie. She stared at me from the seat next to me the whole movie. I'm sure there were lunatics there just to see if I was going to try to stick my arm around her or something. They giggled through the first 10 minutes looking at me. I turned and told them to shut up, quite loudly with slight aggression. They did, and I watched the movie. It was a weird, "yes sir" response. Cool movie then, looks silly now. Things got oppressively difficult after I didn't move on to holding hands and stuff. I got promoted a few times until I had my own shared office. I was really good at what I was learning to do. It made it more difficult. I was interested in the job and the whole process of massive-scale orchard farming. I personally handled hundreds of thousands of trees from rootstock seed planting, through budding, to plant out and then fertilizing and tending them. Then taking over irrigation monitoring and then scheduling for thousands and thousands of the trees I started from rootstock seed myself. My own forest of sorts. I was freakishly awesome at the techno-irrigation stuff. With amazing results. Then had a car accident on my way to work, the day after I had medical scans for something that was still being diagnosed that was caused when I was in hospital in 1996 and attacked when in a coma. There were concerns about my fertility. That caused them to have a breakdown with me. They turned out to have tried to chemically sterilize me when I was in hospital in a coma in 1996. They fooled the 7 females into thinking I would try to get one pregnant if we ended up engaged and then married, so they could pretend it was desperately trying to have an eligible Habsburg baby before my father died. Without telling them they tried to make me infertile in hospital in 1996. It was so that if I did have sex with one to attempt to get her pregnant, they could all laugh at her later if no baby happened, apparently. And to attempt to talk me into thinking that if I wanted to check my fertility, the best way would be no contraception sex with one of them. They just wanted to see the look on one of the females' face when she realized the 7 of them weren't getting anything from my royal estates, even if we married and tried to have a baby. Semi-funny quasi-violent psycho-comedy genius, they thought it was. But I wouldn't play along and regularly date it or hold its hand. I ended up casually putting my arm on the shoulder of one whilst talking to her, to reach for something in my shared office one afternoon. The only physical contact I had made apart from handshakes. Nobody understood how deeply offended I was. They went out celebrating, leaving me at home and not inviting me for drinks. With a "woohoo, this is it, he'll be engaged within a few months." In 2000 things got very difficult, and they pretended my only chance for a sympathetic ear and a hug was one of the 7 females. Approaching anyone else got a blunt, abrupt, deliberately upsetting response. They may as well have homicide saying need an ear and a hug. Try one of the violent, filthy extortionist idiots who had 10 or more babies in less than a year in 1997 with your stolen sperm you are refusing to date. The night I left, I stopped to say a quick goodbye to one of the 2 men claiming to be dating the women pretending to be my mother, swapping places pretending to be the same couple. He wouldn't talk coherently back, went outside, and they sent in one of my daughters, one of the 7 females. They expected me to ask to spend the night with her or something, for false emotional support. I said I had to leave, gave it a fatuous hug, and drove away in my wrecked via a car accident but drivable car. The referendum had confirmed me as Germany's constitutional monarchy for another 100 years in January 2000, and they pretended nothing had been done to contact me beforehand since abdication in 1977, so they could wait for the referendum. I lasted until around mid-2000 before quitting. To be honest, some days I struggled to even get up out of bed. Constitutional monarchy referendums can only be held once every 100 years, and the most recent one had been January 1900. Eligible German citizens voted to endorse Crown Prince Alois Hitler the Hohenzollern and his only eligible living child Prince Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern as the next 2 Kaisers of Germany to be, by a result of 93% yes. They had been behaving as if they weren't sure if German citizens wanted me as their monarchy. There were at least half a dozen attempts to kill me afterwards, until I finally quit and went home. They went back to pretending Alois and Adolf weren't really German royalty afterwards, despite openly saying they were, and that they were endorsed by referendum in 1900. That is why one on me couldn't be held until January 2000. Once a century. I discovered that Australian tabloid Land lunatics get on surprisingly well with the German version. Exceedingly common themes and goals. It unlocked a few things in me. They apparently spent nearly 10 years waiting for me to start to think about trying to get married to a female and have an eligible Habsburg child desperately quickly so one would be born before my father died. They probably had plans to kill him before it got born, or steal it off me, maybe replace it with an imposter's brat conceived by someone else in one of the other 6. If I could conceive one at all. If I couldn't, they would just laugh at the 7 females. Then try to make me impersonate a raped or beaten child, screaming like I was being crushed to death up against a seat at the footy or something. So, some of them have changed their official logos since and are pretending they're my father, haunting me for not trying to get married and desperately have an eligible Habsburg royal child before he died, as if it is what he did in 1958, and he expected it of me, but I didn't do it. He died in March 2004, and I became a Duke of Austria and a Lord of Hungary. They ignored the fact my father Kevin was not the only generationally eligible Habsburg on the same family level who could have an eligible child when he got married in 1958. There were already 10 eligible great-grandchildren of Prince Sebastian Habsburg at the time, approximately. My father got married at 27 because he thought he was settled enough and wanted some company at home. Given what happened to royal families since before World War I, he didn't have any excited eyes rolled back royal expectations about his life after his grandfather died. But lunatics always pretend that is inevitable, regardless of close family ties being the higher priority. Being genuine royalty does not cause the individual to lose all sense of close family connection and emotional attachment due to the thought of wealth, royal titles, property, artifacts, or celebrity. Anyone who pretends royalty are immune from family grief and emotional distress is not welcome to interact with me. There isn't a clause saying eligible royal family members on the same generational level must all have had an eligible child to receive inheritance, and if yours is stolen before birth and you don't have one, you miss out on your inheritance. Tough luck. My dad Kevin did have an eligible royal Habsburg child in 1972. Me. People bred with my father Kevin's sperm without his consent, and without being registered to him at birth within royal family rules, are not relevant when discussing the Habsburg estate. Even if people pretend he was mean because his first eligible child was stolen before birth, and he didn't end up having an eligible royal Habsburg child in his custody before his grandfather Prince Sebastian died in 1960. Vulgar violent repeat subhuman vomit. My uncle Ian Webb the Habsburg, who was eligible to become a Duke and Lord when his father Duke and Lord James died, 1984, was murdered in the 1970s in Queensland, shortly after I met him as a child. It was a lunatic anti-albino attack, with anti-homosexual themes. His body was then molested after death by part French lunatics from a part of France called French Guiana, in northeast South America. The South American connection in all that sort of thing. The perpetrators were lunatics related to the French Guiana lunatics who murdered all but one French royal in the 1790s. It left Napoleon as the only eligible person to become Emperor of France at the time. Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern actually left me 3 estates as the sole beneficiary. All 3 have been legally confirmed as rightfully mine beyond appeal in court. The Hohenzollern royal family estate abdicated to me in 1977. Succession procedures started October 2016. All of it is in my name and not transferable. His diplomatic asylum estate in Italy under the name Wolfgang Alphonse. All of it is in my name and is not transferable. And a boring normal German civilian publicly available will kid estate, registered in Germany in the 1970s under the civilian name Adolf Hitler. It contains everything else he owned outside of the other 2 estates, including Friedrich Hohenzollern IV's private Gippsland estate, illegally withheld by Australia since World War I. Over 106 years as of 2024. And private property I own in and near Baghdad, Iraq. Amongst a myriad of other things. Mainly music, art, books and property. The Friedrich Hohenzollern IV private Gippsland estate being illegally withheld from my Hohenzollern family since WW1 was Australia's fault alone between 1918 and 1982. When I inherited it in April 1982 in the 3rd civilian German will kid estate, it made it Germany's fault as well. They have never contacted me to distribute that estate to me. If someone comes to my country of citizenship to contact me about the Wilkit estate, they make sure everyone thinks they are here to contact me about the Hohenzollern royal estate before they arrive. If someone comes to my country of citizenship to contact me about my Hohenzollern royal family estate, they make sure everyone thinks they are here to contact me about the German civilian Wilkit estate before they arrive. Don't be fooled or lulled into a false sense of security. World War I, and more particularly World War II, are not over. The Morans who pretended everyone involved only got involved to try to steal royal family estates and titles off the owners, as if the only motive for the wars at all, are still at it now. With probably hundreds of thousands of illegally bred biologically related people they bred since. They always fall back to the same excuse. One of Albert Einstein's younger half-brothers was part of the group of people from the terrorism group the Black Hand who assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife in Serbia in 1914. Franz Ferdinand was my great-great-grandfather Emperor Franz-Joseph I's nephew. What became World War I was already seriously in progress and had been for years. Decades in some people's opinions. Franz Ferdinand's assassination caused the first official diplomatic document delivered declaration of World War I. Because it was the first official diplomatic declaration within official diplomatic channels, and Einstein was involved in it to attempt to steal the Habsburg estate of my Habsburg royal family using an impostor pretending to be successor to be Charles in 1916, lunatics pretend the entire war was solely to steal royal family estates and titles off royal families worldwide. Regardless of why people were already involved in war before the declaration, or why military from other countries got involved afterwards. Order has not been restored on this planet until all illegally withheld estates are distributed to the actual owners who were the legitimate beneficiaries of each estate. Italy is the classic example. There are literally thousands of states illegally withheld there for absolutely no valid reason. The lunatics involved are incorrectly saying WW1 and WW2 were solely for the purpose of stealing estates, reinforced by fake history media broadcast on television after it became commercially available shortly after WW2. They are now pretending television was specifically invented and put on sale commercially to the public after WW2 to broadcast fake historical material to attempt to steal estates for the people involved in the fake history programs off the real owners. As an example, an escaped life without parole prison inmate in Germany named Ricky O'Shea was tried at Nuremberg in November 1945. It was for crimes committed with the neo-Nazis through to the end of World War II, after they caused his escape from jail in December 1943. And for illegally using the identity of Hermann Göring whilst doing it, made over by a film production crew to look like Göring, wearing Göring's uniform, and using Göring's identity documents. People started pretending it was really Hermann Göring on trial at Nuremberg for early unofficial television broadcasts after World War II, using some basic editing of the trial films. Hermann was worth quite a lot of money when he died quietly in around 1964. When he did, they started pretending the O'Shea family had to receive his estate instead of the beneficiaries because they were pretending O'Shea on trial at Nuremberg was going on trial after television became commercially available to the public. They have embellished since, propagated on the internet. It is really difficult to find the real name of Ricky O'Shea associated with the Nuremberg trials when searching for information. Even though the Nuremberg trial court records all clearly stated Hermann Göring had nothing to do with the trials, he wasn't even called as a witness. It was Ricky O'Shea on trial, including for torturing Hermann Göring in Dachau in 1944 and 1945. Descendants and relatives of Ricky O'Shea are pretending they are still waiting to be illegally given Hermann Göring's estate, illegally withheld from the beneficiaries since Hermann died quietly in around 1964. They have been involved in escalated violence and criminal activity since 1964 and claim to be confused as to why nobody has illegally given them Hermann's estate. All based on the idea that people can't get a record of the Nuremberg trials easily on the internet that actually says it was O'Shea on trial. All you get is altered media pretending Göring was in the dock, with images of O'Shea on trial used, where O'Shea desperately tried to maintain his film production crew costumed Hermann Göring look. The court records had the correct names, so that is why they pretend they can ignore the courts. They claim every corrupt sports result is a demand for all the illegally withheld estates to be handed over to the people and families swapped over in the fake history records, who are still attempting to steal them. They are still pretending the Romanov royal family estate has to be handed over to Anastasopoulos Greek rewalts, related to the impostors executed for pretending to be the Romanov royal family in public in 1917. They did so tentatively after the real Romanov royal family were abducted and murdered, including my great-grandmother Alexandra, in 1916. They think they are illegally getting the Romanov estate by swapping the two groups on Wikipedia entries and changing some information about events to suit. Complete insanity. The odd organized crime smartass who doesn't equate order being restored after world wars in the 1900s with distributing the illegally withheld estates to the rightful owners as confirmed in court will give you a stock standard response. When they wave illegally withheld estates under the noses of lunatics pretending they are going to steal them and have a plan, someone lets bombs off and there are organized crime and military-like skirmishes. Become an arms dealer then, mate. Make yourself some money. Conventional weapons, hardware, satellites, radiation, nuclear waste to poison food, sports doping products, substitute umpires, whatever, anything. Though maybe some of it will stop if a few of the estates are handed over to the terrorists trying to steal them. Line just doesn't cut it. Who have they got fooled with that one? Nobody. I will state what I have said repeatedly, more times than I could remember to count. My second predecessor Kaiser Wilhelm II was a childless, only child of his father Kaiser Frederick IV. That is why the permanently defunct Kingdom of Prussia became defunct when Emperor Wilhelm II died in 1941. My Hohenzollern royal family continued through the family descendants of Wilhelm II's uncle Prince Alois Hitler the Hohenzollern. Wilhelm II directly abdicated to his cousin Crown Prince Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern in 1918. I am the next official Hohenzollern royal, Kaiser Adolf's confirmed successor. People are still pretending they can steal my royal Hohenzollern estate off me by pretending both Frederick IV and Wilhelm II had around 9 children each and married females multiple times. By claiming to be descended from the two of them via a fake history entry on something like Wikipedia or encyclopedias like Britannica. Even though Kaiser Wilhelm II had no descendants. They are not casual lunatics either. We are talking full-on, pain-inflicting, psycho-stalker terrorists pretending to insist.